Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Dr. G's Think Tank on resilience. I'm really glad you're here because we're going to talk about the kind of resilience that people just assume that they will have or have some shame about not having. We're going to talk about how to find it. What we're discussing this month is the resilience we need to build our careers, to take a leap. And maybe that leap is just applying for an internal promotion. Maybe that leap is mentioning to your supervisor that you'd be interested in some more opportunities or some challenges. Maybe that leap is looking outside your current organization for a different job. And maybe that leap is striking out on your own and starting your own business. Whatever it is, I want us to talk about what does that take? Why do people struggle with it? And what are the strategies that really work to help encourage our ambition and move us forward? Joining me today is, for sure, at least one amazing guest. Linda Fisk is a multi-award-winning CEO. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a 6 times international best-selling author. She is a US Senator for the WBAF. We're going to ask her about that. She's a TV producer and a podcast host, a keynote speaker, and a university professor dedicated to amplifying and extending the success of other high caliber leaders. She's the chairwoman of Leadership Global, a community of unstoppable women enhancing their leadership blueprint and embracing their power to be the best version of themselves in work and in life. In Leadership Global, Linda supports and guides ambitious and creative women to move in the direction of their purpose, their mission, and their dreams. You can see why I thought she'd be really great to talk about this topic, I think. Linda, hi, welcome.
It is so good being here with you, Dr. G. Thanks so much for allowing me to be a guest on this program that honestly I listen to all the time. I feel like I learned so much from you, Dr. G. And so thank you. It's a real thrill to be here with you.
I'm really excited that you are. And I want to start off by asking you a personal question. What's the biggest leap you have taken? And how did you find the resilience to go for it?
I love that. I will tell you that I think deciding to leave my very lucrative, rewarding, fulfilling CEO position and step into my own entrepreneurial journey, launching Leadership Global, was by far my biggest leap. And I think I found the resilience to go for it through kind of a combination of what I would consider to be grit and grace. I define grit as a combination of mental toughness, perseverance, character, ability to push towards excellence while allowing room for failure. And I think to really unpack this concept of grace, you first have to know and accept your own shortcomings and failures. You have to deeply understand some of the consistent themes that are embedded in your past and kind of woven through your life story. Because in my mind, those really are the keys to your purpose and your future. You have to really understand your limitations, your mistakes, your shortcomings, your failures, really examine those recurring issues. And that is honestly the key to knowing your value.
That all makes sense to me, and I want to dive into it. I want to let everybody know, normally you'll see me with 2 or 3 guests. We had one guest who had to not come today because he just recently, within the last 6 months, took a new position in a totally different part of his organization. And they asked him to step up into a leadership role for Pride Month today, right now, and he couldn't change that date. So he was sorry not to join us. He's really fantastic, and hopefully we'll have him as a guest in the future. And we have another guest that we are still waiting on and hoping will join us. And if he's able to, I'll introduce him at that time. I joke all the time as someone who speaks and consults about resilience that you can't talk about resilience and ever complain about anything. And so I don't mean to complain, and I'm not, because this has happened once before, that it was just me and one guest on the day of the think tank. It turned out to be such a really deep, interesting conversation. And it means that everybody who's joined us in the Zoom today, you're our other guest. So please, in addition to putting questions in the chat, as Carlota has welcomed you to do, if you want to share something, if you had an experience or are considering an opportunity, or like a couple of people I can see that I know who are in the room also do mentor others towards the best version of their own professional lives, we're interested in everybody's thoughts and knowledge and questions about this topic. So I hope you'll join us. Linda, here's the thing. Nobody is surprised, and it would be sort of a boring conversation if we just talked about how change is scary. And of course, it's easier to stick with the known than jump to the unknown. So we'll take that as given. I think most adults recognize that to be true. And I'd like to dive a little bit deeper because inherent in the idea that all change is scary is that not all pivoting or advancing is the right call, right? It could go terribly awry. You could have theoretically failed profoundly when you left that amazing CEO position.
Yes.
And so before we get into the meat and the strategies, I'd like to ask you, I bet you've had the experience of someone coming to you and being like, encourage me to take this big leap. And you listened for a minute and thought, you shouldn't take that particular leap. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we thread the needle between that grit and grace you're talking about, really, pushing for excellence with the possibility of failure, and not being foolhardy or rushing into things that just for the sake of the possibility of advancement? What do you look for when someone's telling you about an opportunity they're considering to see if you think it's a good risk?
So I talk about bookends, and the bookends of making a decision are what is the very best outcome that you think is likely, not blue sky. If everything aligns perfectly, this might possibly be an outcome, but a really positive outcome that is fairly likely. What does that bookend look like? And alternatively, what is the bookend if everything sort of goes sideways? If things don't work out, what does that downside look like? And can you live with it? So for me, it's really about risk management. It's really about understanding the risk associated with big decisions. What is the downside? And what's the likelihood? And what is the upside? And what is the likelihood? But I would say in between those two big bookends are 1,000 different scenarios. And I think it starts also by giving yourself grace. As I said, you know your value because failure does not define you. In fact, failure and all the experiences of failure in your life can become the very building blocks that make you stronger and make you more valuable. You can really envision what is likely, what is the downside based on experience, and what is the upside based on experience. So you can and will do better the next time you take a risk if you allow yourself to. So I think of grace as freely given favor. It's a kind of mercy that you extend to yourself. It's a sense of generosity and kindness, almost like a kind of moral strength and favor, even when it's not deserved. And being able to extend that to other people is often much easier than it is to extend it to ourselves. But it's the understanding and forgiveness born out of self-discovery, self-acceptance. And that journey begins with really understanding your history and all of your missteps and all of your mistakes and all of your failures and saying, yep, I accept all of that as building blocks to where I'm going. I accept all of that as a level set to not repeat those same mistakes, but to learn from them. It was just my first attempt in learning. And now I have the opportunity to take all of that learning and apply it into my next step.
That acronym for FAIL, first attempt in learning, I've heard before. I also know that as adults, we have bills to pay, right? We have people who are counting on us. So we are going to talk about the practical. Bruce, you asked in your question really two questions. You said, how do you position the timing of making a leap? And so we're going to talk right now a little bit more about that leap idea, where you really could stay on where you are without a ton of negative consequences in the near term. That's what I think of a leap, meaning you're not trying to get out of a terrible situation. Your status quo is livable, right?
Yes.
It's just not. And so you could absolutely reasonably stay where you're at. And he also asks, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, how much time do you allow yourself to judge if the outcome was positive? And that's
That's
that's a
great.
great, I mean, you've probably seen the needlepoint pillow that says, it'll be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but that idea of like, maybe it's just not over yet. It's not time, you shouldn't look at your metrics yet. But let's talk about this idea of timing a leap, the decision making, and the resilience to take the risk part. So in my scientific work, we define resilience as the ability to navigate change with intention, purpose towards a positive goal.
Yes.
And so if your positive goal is, for example, to be your own boss, or your positive goal is the mission that the company you work for currently might be aligned with, but isn't really focusing on, and your mission, your dream, the purpose that you see, the difference you want to make in the world. When I started my own business, what I wanted to create was a more resilient society. And do I think that at my health center we help do that? Yeah, I think it's aligned, but it wasn't our raison d'etre. It wasn't our reason for being. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to start. I don't know what it looks like. I don't exactly know what I'm going to do. The worst question I ever got as a business, as a new business leader was, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I'm glad I never put too much energy into trying to answer that question, because I don't even think if I look at every 2 year point in my business, I could have predicted 2 years before what was possible or where I could be. And I don't just mean it's grown. I mean, like, I didn't even know what trajectory I should be looking at. I needed to evaluate every opportunity that came to me. But what do you suggest about positioning the timing of making a leap? Do you save up a little bit in terms of money or goodwill with your people and your, your network
Yeah.
and your connections? What do you worry about what you've put in the bank, literally and metaphorically, before you make the leap?
I think it's always a good idea to do a little bit of an audit or an inventory of what your life looks like now, good and bad, and what your life will probably look like if you were to make that leap. And I think of life as being more than just financial or social or psychological. It's really a combination of all those things. So physically, it means that I won't have my commute in the morning every day if I move from a corporate position into being my own boss and moving into an entrepreneurial sort of environment, right? So maybe physically that is a plus for me. But then socially, I'm going to be disconnected from a team that I've worked with for the last 10 years. I have deep, rich relationships with, and an entrepreneurial journey. I'm going to be solo. I'm really not going to have a team to be able to rely on or to share tasks with. So maybe that's a negative. And then financially, I might have a nest egg that I feel really good about, but there will probably be 3 or 4 months of investment into my entrepreneurial journey that will deplete that nest egg before I have revenue sort of coming in the door. So, do I have enough to be able to withstand that kind of financial stress? And then in every single aspect of your life, I think you need to go through that little audit, that little exercise of the inventory of really what your life looks like now that may be really comfortable and positive, and what that change will create in your life across all facets of your life, psychologically, socially, financially, physically, in every aspect of your life, whether it's friends or finance or family or even your level of fun. How will that change? And as you look at those changes that are likely to happen due to this leap, are those changes that you're excited about, nervous about, or that are absolutely non-starters for you? If you find that there are particular aspects of making that leap, making that change that right now you simply can't accept, then I'd say now is not the time, right? And maybe it will never be the time. But I do think that you need to consider things like your financial welfare. How young is your family? Is your family really young and needs a lot of your time? Are you at a place where you have the support of a spouse to take this leap? Are you at a place where socially you have enough of a network around you that leaving a team environment is not going to be devastating? So I think all of those things help you determine if the trade-offs are worth it and if the timing is right.
What are some practical tips you would give for figuring out, what do I need to audit? Meaning, my finances, I get it. I got to see what I'm earning. So I get from this job for sure comp and benefits, hopefully benefits. So I got to figure out, okay, what would I be losing? Maybe I'd be losing a little bit of retirement money. Maybe I would be losing health insurance. Maybe I would be using paid time off, because here's something about being an entrepreneur. There's no paid time off, right? At the beginning,
Shocker.
there's no paid time on, actually. Right? Like you said, you can expect to lose money for a while. So there's the finances and the benefits. Yes. There's the time audit. And you touched on it when you talked about commuting, but really just tracking what you do over a few weeks, not to the minute. I'm not asking anybody to be obsessive, but one way to get some metrics is to figure out where you put your time with the job that you have now, and figure out how your job is impacting your relationships. Maybe are there any categories I'm missing? What other auditing can I do just to see where I'm at now before I even make a decision about if I want to make a big change?
Yeah, I love that. And part of the auditing or the inventory that you can conduct on your own life, I love the idea of really looking at where you're spending your time over the course of a week or a month now, and say, are there some levers I can pull in my life right now that might better balance the demands and the obligations I have in my life? Meaning, could I stop work at 6 p.m. and then take an hour to make a dinner that I think is not just nutritional and delicious, but really I feel better about serving my family? So, are there some trade-offs there that I can make that would make my life, as it is currently designed, something that would give me greater joy, greater fulfillment, greater happiness, and a greater sense of resilience? Or do I feel as though, my life is so predetermined, so set, that I don't have any wiggle room? There are no levers that I can pull to make compromises or changes or pivots in certain areas of my life that will give me a greater sense of balance. And so taking this leap is the right next step. This is the right next step for me. But even as you did that, I would say, Dr. G, what you just offered, looking at a time study, a work time study of exactly how much time you're spending, in your current life watching TV. Guess what? If you become an entrepreneur, that's likely to go away.
Yeah. You
Or,
might as well give up your Netflix account. You're not going to need it.
you're not going to need it. Or, going out to lunch with friends, or meeting teammates for dinner, or going to birthday parties. All those things are likely to be deprioritized really significantly if you move into an entrepreneurial journey. So again, I think being able to do a time audit of how you're organizing your life now, really making conscious, purposeful, and intentional decisions about how you might redesign that life to better fit. Or if it is time to make that big leap, know what trade-offs you're willing to give up in that new normal, right? And being as prepared as possible for that will be really important. I've seen even people moving from a senior vice president position into a C-suite position. They are shocked at the level of intensity, the level of time, the level of expectation that their lives are put on hold because of something happening in the corporate business, right? So even at a C-suite, you don't have weekends. You often don't have nights. I work for a global organization. I never had weekends or evenings. And so you have to also know what it means to move even into a C-suite position, what the expectations are, because it's wholly different.
Well, and you don't know what you don't know. So I think that what I'm hearing you suggest is that after I've done the audit of what's my life like now, then whatever the leap I'm considering making, whether it's an internal promotion I might apply for, or a different company that is hiring that for a position I'm considering, or starting my own thing, I need to gather some information so that I can have a best guess. There's no way to know for sure, but I can have a best guess about what that's like. So we are talking a lot about entrepreneurship, but I want to think about intrapreneurship, meaning people who advance in their own company, or people who want to change careers, but don't want to work for themselves, just are thinking about a totally different career. What are good ways for people who are in that position, who are really considering it, to gather some data about what would life look like in the C-suite if I applied for it, or what does life look like working for that competitor company over there? How do I find out?
Yeah, that's so smart. So I'm going to sort of offer a little bit of a twist on that question. And then I'd love for you to answer also, what do you think that anyone considering a leap should do to gather the right information? I think having a community of people around you where you can be very honest and very authentic and very transparent about your concerns, about your issues, about your questions, and receive objective, unbiased guidance is incredibly important. Everyone needs to have a network around them, a community around them of others that they respect and admire who have been there and done that, who can give them the real information around what that leap looks like and what they have experienced. But even beyond that, I would say that starting your audit, starting your inventory with yourself is so important. I said that one of the ways that I was able to make the leap from a corporate position, a CEO job, into an entrepreneurial journey is grit and grace. And I will tell you that really understanding your own level of grit is so important. So I think your first step in audit and inventory of your life circumstances begins with you. So really understanding your ability to really have grit through the tough times of that change, I will tell you that will determine whether life changes are something that will invigorate you, energize you, or deplete you. And for me, my level of grit determined that my life challenges will neither define me nor defeat me. It was the level of toughness and courage, bravery, resilience, and really spirit that drove me forward and made me confident that I could make that leap and it would be okay. For me, grit is really about the backbone, the inspiration, kind of the steel nerve that you have to have through unexpected twists and turns. And when things don't turn out anywhere close to what you expected, right? It's the vision that you cling to. And I think you have to assess your own level of grit, where your perseverance really meets your passion. And if you feel like your purpose, your mission, your vision, the meaning that you're placing on that leap is bigger than your fear, your anxiety, or even the worst case scenario, then I'd say you're ready. Your level of grit is ready, but you really need to inventory and assess your ability to be resilient through that change.
Okay, that's really helpful. What we've been talking about up until now is how do I decide on the timing of a risky, potentially, hopefully positive jump? We are now joined by Matt Scott. Matt, let me introduce you really quickly so that everybody knows who you are. Matt is a wheelchair basketball legend. He's carved his name in Paralympic history. He is a five-time Paralympic. Matt's dedication to excellence has propelled him to the top of his sport, where recently he was inducted into the National Wheelchair Basketball Hall of Fame. His impressive career with Team USA includes back-to-back Paralympic golds in Rio and Tokyo, and a 12-year professional wheelchair basketball career playing in multiple leagues across Europe. His collection of accolades and his commitment to raising the perception of wheelchair basketball have earned widespread support across the adaptive sports community, and his influence transcends the court. Matt became the first US Paralympian in a Nike commercial, and his ability to captivate audiences showcasing his skills has led to endorsements with some of the world's largest brands, Google, Pixel, Nike, Apple, Ralph Lauren. Matt has been such a powerful advocate for adaptive sports that he was nominated for an ESPY Award for his contributions. He launched Fly Without Limits, a global social impact organization that breaks down barriers for people with disabilities, equipping them with the tools and resources to reach their full potential. And in addition to his athletic and professional achievements, he made history by becoming the first and only so far Paralympian to report on both the Olympics and the Paralympics. Matt, hello. I'm so glad you could join us.
Thank you so much. And you know what? Today's topic is going to be so important that like the resilience because I left my bag and all my devices in my Uber on the way over here. So I'll talk about resilience. I'm ready to go though. I it's okay. It's
Thank
gonna
you
be
for
tracked
finding
down.
enough to make this on somebody's phone. Oh, okay. So, Matt, will you introduce us to yourself by way of answering this question?
Absolutely.
What's the biggest leap of all those leaps? What's the biggest leap you've taken, and how did you find the resilience to go for it?
Ooh, I'd hate to have a recency bias, but my recent leap from being a professional athlete, being a full-time Paralympian, on to launching Fly Without Limits, and also into my professional career where I work at Visa. Um, I um, I found that it was a big leap because basketball and athleticism was my comfort zone. This is exactly what I know. So to move into the corporate space and to launch my own foundation, those were the unknown, but it really felt like my calling, and it really felt like it leaned into my why. So from the from the foundation standpoint, it felt like it was really going towards my why because I've always wanted to represent the disability community and break down some of the barriers that I've seen since I was born with my disability and leaping into the corporate space. I have never seen, I shouldn't say I've never seen, but it's not common for me to see leaders in the corporate space that have physical disabilities. And I have this mindset, why not me? So I'm just kind of jumping towards that, and those are two of the leaps that I can say stand out to me right now.
That's really helpful, and I appreciate that context. What we've been talking about, and what I really want to keep moving forward through, is how we build the resilience we need to go out and find great opportunities to advance. And when I first posed this question, I said to advance in our careers, but I don't just mean our careers. I really mean advance. And so far, we've talked about a couple of strategies. And I think we're not just saying, here's a whole toolbox, pick one. We're saying step by step. First, Linda suggested that we audit where we're at now, right? Before a leap, when you're either thinking about looking for an opportunity, and that opportunity might be striking out on your own, but it might be applying for a job or a promotion or to work at a different company. To audit where you're at in terms of money. If you're thinking about jumping out on your own, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be a loss for a while for sure. In terms of benefits, you're going to have the health insurance you need. Do you have any idea how to get health insurance for yourself if you don't have an HR department to turn to? But also, we talked about auditing your time. Where do you spend your time now? And how is that intersecting with your relationships? So audit your relationships. How are they doing now? Given the amount of time you put into what you do, are you connected the way you mean to be to your family, to your friends, to your community, whatever it is? And then as you came in, Linda was just talking about doing something that I am going to think a lot more about, and probably, I'm warning my community, write a lot more about, and that is auditing your resilience. I write to my community once a week, and I had written last week about how our motivation is a good key resilience indicator. That if you notice that like your resilience has kind of dropped or your motivation's kind of dropped, it's probably a sign that your resilience isn't doing as well as it had been or as you want it to be. But there are other ways, and I want to think a lot more about that. There are other ways to really audit your own resilience. Linda, you use this beautiful phrase, grit and grace. Grit, in a sociologic definition standpoint, grit is a subset of resilience. Grit is what you need in the face of adversity. Resilience is what you need in the face of all change. Like Matt's looking for some grit this morning about finding all his devices or getting along without them until he can replace them, right? Resilience would be, when you got the offer to come and be a commentator, report on the Olympics, and you had to decide, was I going to do that or not? Even if you were thrilled to get it, even if, and I don't know, you applied for it or you campaigned for it in some way, still, when you get it, your brain goes, cool, but could we die? Like every risk our brain looks at as every change our brain looked at as possible risk. And it first evaluates, is this risky? And so you still needed resilience even to take on an amazing opportunity. When you win the gold, like when that buzzer goes off and you look at the scoreboard just to read, the score in your bones, right? But like you just still, I've seen it every athlete I've ever watched, and I'm lucky enough to be on True Sport, which is our advisory committee for the youth arm of the Olympic and Paralympic. Every time I see an athlete compete. If they can see the scoreboard, they look at the scoreboard when it's over, even though they already know. They just want to see it in, in lights. And your brain still says, the gold, could we die? It's the thing you've worked for, wanted, whatever. Your brain still has these speed bumps to make sure you're safe no matter what. So doing that resilience audit where we figure out, how am I? And Gary brought up something really interesting in the chat. And Matt, I'd like for you to speak to it if you don't mind. What about a health audit? We've talked about career and family as it impacts resilience. What about doing a health audit? Should you, when you're offered an opportunity, think about like, how healthy am I? Do I have anything coming up, from a health standpoint that I need to consider in my timeline? Do you think about that? Do you, Linda, either of you?
I definitely think about that. I mean, I even from a mental health standpoint, it's just like how much am I taking on in my personal life? How much what is my plate like? How full is my plate to take on this new challenge? Because they say that what's the phrase about pouring from an empty cup, but
Right.
also trying to eat from a plate that's too full is also extremely challenging. So both mental and physical health is super important in terms of moving forward and advancing.
What gives you energy? I think is so important too. You're right, Dr. G, in that my definition of grit is based on Angela Duckworth's
Right.
definition of grit, which is mental toughness, perseverance, and character. And in my mind, really understanding sort of your level of grit and grace for yourself, like what you offer yourself in terms of grace and what level of grit is available to you right now is so important. But in my mind, it is definitely physical, knowing, I am really depleted right now because I've just come through 3 conferences and 2 networking mixers, and I've been on 5 podcasts. Knowing that that depletes my energy will allow me to make smarter decisions moving forward about what I say yes to, right? But if I say, golly, I just had the most amazing retreat where I spent a lot of time alone, I was able to really sit with my thoughts, I was able to really strategize by next month. So now I'm ready to tackle anything that has to do with being visible and seen and speaking and networking and all those things that normally I would consider to be a drain on my physical self. I'm now ready for it. So really at any point in time, understanding what gives you energy and where are you on that continuum, I think just allows you to make smarter decisions about how you spend your time and what you're willing to tackle.
I think that's absolutely true. I had to think a lot about training, right? And now with the kids that you work with, you're probably encouraging them to like work even when there's not a big competition that day, right? We want to train up for things. And so in addition to, training up our physical health, maybe we've done this audit now. We've audited our time and our money and our resilience and our health and our bandwidth and energy and all that. I can save some money towards a leap. I can say, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Maybe I'm applying for a position in another company and it's more in line with my purpose, who I want to be, what I want to do, but it pays a little less. So I'm going to save up for it financially. How do you save up from a resilience standpoint? And I don't mean like conserve your resilience. I mean, how do you train up to be more resilient, more ready to take on opportunities? Do you have any thoughts about that, Matt?
Well, I think this concept of auditing your resilience is extremely important, and just like identifying how ready you are for challenges. I define resilience as the way that we bounce back from something, by how we see a challenge and how we bounce back from it. And every single one of us experiences challenges every single day. And so whether it be a small challenge or a huge challenge, you can really sort of identify how are you tackling that challenge? Am I going about this the right way? Am I going about this in a way that really leans into my ability to be resilient. So this auditing is extremely important. Just identifying how you're stepping over the small hurdles and how you're really approaching these large, almost seemingly, insurmountable hurdles. Like how are you approaching those? So just identifying and again auditing those.
That makes sense. So here's the thing. Here's why I don't like saying that resilience is about bouncing back, because you bounce back when something's over. And so many of the things that we need resilience for, sometimes they don't end, or at least they don't end for a while, right? So I'm really interested in expanding the definition of resilience to be even in the thick of it, in the middle of it. How do I navigate it? So not only how do I get to be who I mean to be after it, which is what bouncing back sounds like to me, but what do I need? How can I train up? Like, okay, I think about resilience and exercise a lot. I'm a reluctant runner, meaning I'm a reluctant aerobic athlete in any way. I like to have done it. I very rarely like how I feel during it. And so, but I know that if I wanted to be able to swim 20 laps, I got to start off by swimming 1 lap. And I'm probably going to feel awful after 2 laps. And my goal would be that when if I do that often enough, when I swim in a week or two, I can probably expect that I won't feel awful until lap 4, right? That's how we build our aerobic strength. And I think resilience is to some degree like that. So, Linda, I want to start with you. Although, Matt, I'm not going to leave you alone about this. I want to ask, when you're working with other people and they're like, oh, I just don't have it in me. Not just like right this second, my plate's too full, but like, I'm just not strong enough for that.
Yeah.
But they want to be.
Right.
What would you suggest they can do to train up for that resilience?
Yep. So I was a runner and a triathlete. So I ran marathons, triathlons, all through high school,
with nobody
college.
chasing you, just because you wanted to. No, with nobody chasing you, just because you
I
wanted to.
know, I know. There was no one chasing me. A bear wasn't behind me, nothing. And what was interesting to me is that when I was younger, beginning this journey of running, I really liked the alone time. I liked the time spent with my thoughts in prayer, in contemplation, and reflection. And then it just became sort of the longer I would run, the more time I'd have to myself, which I love. So in fact, I began becoming well known for that. I got a track scholarship to college. I became nationally ranked as a triathlete, nationally ranked as a marathoner. And I will tell you that my biggest successes, whether it's athletic or academic or in my career, taught me the power of perseverance. It's really about tenacity, it's about steadfastness, and it's also about, again, giving yourself grace, forgiveness, kindness when you don't do as well. Listen, there have been many races where I couldn't even believe my time. It was like beyond anything that I thought I would ever be able to achieve. And then there were races where I thought, am I sick? Like, what's going on? I did so much worse than I thought I ever would at this stage of my running career or my triathletic career. And I think even in those times, you have to be ready to forgive yourself with kindness and grace and sort of say, it's okay. I can do better next week. And so it's really the power of perseverance, tenacity, and really steadfastness that I think helps us not only train to get better and better and better, but also know that is not a linear line of improvement. It's going to be a bumpy road. And during those times that are not as electric, not as successful, you have to be okay with that, right? And I think that that's evident in any successful athlete, any successful career, any successful academic pursuit, that level of resolve and stamina to reach seemingly impossible goals, like what Matt just described.
So what I'm hearing from you is that if you were giving advice to some of the women in leadership global, you would say it's a combination of tenacity and kindness to yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Matt, if you were working with a young athlete in Fly Without Limits and they were like, I mean, I think I want it, but I don't have it in me to do all that work. But you saw something and you thought they might just be wrong, right? Maybe they're feeling a little lazy, or maybe nobody believed in them, or whatever it is. What advice would you give them?
The advice I give them is advice I follow myself is what is your why? Like what is that North Star that gets you going? And I would really encourage whether it be, the littlest of kids to, an adult, in their later years, what is your why? Identify what that why is and go after that relentlessly. It's something that I follow myself, and that keeps me resilient. It keeps me focused. It keeps me going forward. And it's not a matter of motivation at this point. It's just a matter of purpose and how I'm going to get there. So that's the advice that I give, and that's the advice that I follow.
That's really excellent. I think that's probably the third step, because we've really outlined a big first step, which is that internal audit: finances, time, resilience, health, mental health and physical health, our current strategies and how we approach the world, our relationships. The second thing we talked very briefly about, but I think it's an important step, is whatever leap you've been offered or you're thinking about going after, go gather some information. Go learn from people who do it, right? Linda, you gave us the advice that you should find a community of folks that you can be honest with and ask good questions of. And, and Matt, I know you've certainly seen all the advantages and struggles of being a part of a team. But I think even if you're like, well, I don't have that community, you can still go ask some people. You can find places that people who are in those situations, entrepreneurs, if you're thinking about going out on your own, people who've started their own foundation, people who've have currently the level of job in your company that you're thinking about applying to, or people who are in the C-suite, if that's what you're applying to, but they're in other companies, and ask questions. What's your life like? Do you have evenings and weekends free? What kind of time do you have? Did it free up your commute? What of your expectations when you took this job were met or weren't met or were exceeded? So that gathering information is really important so that you can have the best guess. You cannot predict the future, but the best guess about how you're doing. I actually had a patient come in and see me in the office who said, I'm thinking about applying for the vice president job in my company. I wanted to make sure I was healthy first. I was like, great, good idea. I love that. I mean, I will take any reason that people come in for preventive health, but still, I was like, I think that's really smart. When in my state, I'm in Pennsylvania, if you want to adopt, you need a doctor's visit first to say that you're healthy, right? And mental health and physical health, because that's a big stress. It's a wonderful stress. It's a stressful opportunity. Most opportunities are stressful opportunities. And then the third step that you've just laid out so clearly, Matt, is when you're like, okay, I've done this audit. I think I understand what I would be getting myself into. Should I do it? Connect to your purpose. And when you connect to purpose, the answer may not be easy, but it will probably be clear.
Absolutely.
So before we end, I'd like to ask each of you if you have a mantra or a saying or something when you have a stressful opportunity in front of you that your purpose says, yep, I should probably do this. Oh my goodness. Do you have something you say to yourself or that you'd encourage people to say to themselves to be able to then lock into that tenacity?
Actually, I will tell you that I love what Matt said, which is why not me? I thought that was just brilliant because it really begins to, if you allow it to, unpack your fears, your anxieties, your apprehensions, maybe places that you're feeling insignificant or unprepared or unequipped. And then it allows you to say, and I still believe, I have belief, I have faith, I believe that I can do this. I know that along the way, I'm going to have missteps, I'm going to make mistakes, I may even fail, but I have the courage, the bravery, and the resilience to give this a shot. Why not me, right? And I think it's that process that you go through, being really honest with yourself about your fears, anxieties, any place where you feel insignificant or ill-equipped, really taking inventory of that and then still saying, and why not me? I have the
That
courage, I have the bravery, I have the resilience. I know I can do this. It's aligned with my purpose, my mission and vision. Why not me?
I love that. Matt, is
Me
that it?
too.
When you're talking to people who aren't you, do you encourage them to think about that same thing? Say, why not you?
I definitely that's one that I lean into, but you know, to just go a different direction, I live by a no excuse mentality. And it's very I would say that it's very like an athlete's mentality,
It's very
but
Olympian of you.
but I've taken that and I've used that in different arenas, and I'm using that even in my foundation and even in my corporate space, or even in my relationships, because it's not a no excuse like run as fast as you can, shoot as best as you can, you know, lift as many weights. It's like no, hey, this partnership is not going as well. Don't make an excuse. Like look in the mirror. How can I be better? How can I be a better partner? How can I be a better leader? It's all about yeah, don't make excuses. Don't you know, put blame on others or on something exterior. It's about not making excuses. And then the second one is just don't quit. And it's another athlete mindset that I've taken into other realms. And it's not that you know some opportunities aren't for me and I'll go another direction. That's not quitting. That's you know that's re
That's not
uh,
quitting on your purpose. You might quit on one opportunity or one path, but you're not going to quit on your purpose. And it's interesting. I don't think what you just said about no excuses, I think that is why not me. You're saying why not me for opportunities, but also why not me for solutions?
And I think that that is also, as I listen to Matt, it's radical responsibility, which is what I really talk to a lot of women about. What if you took radical responsibility for your life? You literally sat in the driver's seat for every single decision in your life. If you had radical responsibility for every single aspect of your life, what would you change? How would you redesign it? Now, what's stopping you? You do have radical responsibility for your life. There are very few things that are out of your control completely.
I think that we have found a title for our episode. Why not you? Thank you, both of you, so much for joining me. I want to thank everybody who's here with us today and raised such interesting and important points, and everybody who has a chance to watch this or listen to this afterwards. We're going to take our summer hiatus because breaks are important, and we'll be back the fourth Tuesday in September. Thanks, everyone.